Welcome to the online class lecture of Dr. S.K. Paul, Head of the Department of English, BRA, Bihar University, Muzaffarpur. This is in continuation of my previous lecture on migration and diasporic literature. This is part 2 of my lecture. The most nature of diaspora, relocation. The most noteworthy aspect of the diaspora movement is the relocation. Diasporic situation involves social, cultural, psychological, and geographical relocation. Diasporic situations move back and forth between two identities and two cultures, one belonging to the nation and the community they are migrating from, and the other the nation and community they are migrating into. The term diaspora is used in a special consequence in nation states that are multicultural. Cultural theorists are forced to rethink national identity. Emotional bonding. The 20th century is the epoch of globalization. In the context of globalization, diaspora is a new word related to culture. Semantically, diaspora means dynamic and complex. Many people migrate around the globe to pursue their fortunes. They hope to establish a sense of home and community in a foreign country. It has acquired a new meaning in the modern age. A nation, ethnicity, identity, and culture can be viewed in isolation. In this way, the term diaspora is thought in terms of connecting people emotionally. Diaspora is an emotional and psychological state of illustrating two geographical and cultural states and struggling between failure and advancement, dislocation and relocation. An individual has to maintain this continuous shift between two states of dislocation. History and this diaspora is related to history and culture, and these experiences of life yield to subtle tension of dislocation and alienation. Self-knowledge. In general, the theories and concepts of diaspora define the diaspora as a people or community isolated from an original homeland, residing in a host land and preserving connection with the homeland. It is the condition of existing dislocated from the socio-historical constructs which define oneself in a different location, having its own assembling and the resulting effects and features on individual or community. Every diaspora movement holds a historical meaning as it carries within itself the most important part of the nation's history. Diaspora is a voyage towards self-realization, self-recognition, self-knowledge, and self-definition. There is an element of creativity that stands as a reward for the many losses. The present perspective. In recent years, the theoretical innovations of Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Stuart Hall, Paul Gilroy, and James Clifford have encouraged diaspora studies. Beyond the limitations of the nation state, one can understand culture and develop new ways of thinking. The significance of diaspora has been the consideration of the epistemological implications of the term diaspora as theory. Such studies distinguish diaspora in terms of adjustment and creation, adjustment to changes, dislocations and transformations, and the creation of new forms of knowledge and ways of seeing the world. Displacement, being forced or self-imposed, is a calamity. Writers who are displaced tend to shine in their work as a tonic for them. The word exile has a negative inference. Exiles include migrant writers and non-resident writers, and even wander writers who roam about for better pastures to graze and fill their work. World literature has many writers whose writings have prospered while they were in exile. Exiled writers would not have prospered had they not been in exile. Exile. Edward Said delivered lectures in 1993 where he devoted one lecture to the theme of intellectual exile. Said emphasizes the exile as a kind of curmudgeonly disagreeable that makes him have a dislike to the accommodation, accessories, and national well-being. At the end of his book Culture and Imperialism, he quotes a 20th century monk from Saxony, Hugo of St. Vicar, where he explains the expedition of the exile from the native soil to the world. The concept of displacement being forced or self-imposed is a calamity. Writers who are displaced tend to shine in their work as a tonic for them. The person who finds his homeland sweet is still a tender beginner. He to whom every soil is as his native one is already strong, but he is perfect to whom the entire world is a foreign place. In the last paragraph of the book, Said states, there is no reason except fear and prejudice to keep insisting on their separation and distinctiveness, as if that all human life was about. Survival, in fact, is about the connection between things. The effect of exile was not observed on the writer's work. To them, exile emerges as a shocking experience over and above a liberating experience. In the beginning, the writers themselves appeared tonic. Now, in general, the theories and concepts define diaspora as a group of people isolated from an original homeland and preserving a connection with the homeland. It is a state of existing dislocated from the social historical constructs like nation, race, ethnicity, culture, etc. It defines different location having its own idea, resulting on individual or community. Indian diaspora. Indian diaspora has been a debatable subject over the years. It describes the people who migrated from Indian territories. In a general sense, Indian diaspora refers to persons born in India and living abroad, particularly those people who have migrated to foreign lands and have surrendered their Indian citizenship. It is used for those Indian people who reside outside India and have attained foreign citizenship and now belong to the country of their migration. In order to build an understanding of the Indian diaspora, Salgado's definition of diaspora is helpful. Manuel Salgado marks diasporas are fluid, fluctuating systems determined by energy flows and the pressures of globalization and migrant labor. Monica Flodderning also points out nobody has the same dream entirely, and nobody is diaspora, therefore looks wholly like their neighbors. The Indian diaspora is currently estimated to number over 20 million, composed of NRIs, non-resident Indians, and PIOs, persons of Indian origins. To speak of an Indian diaspora is to claim to an essential psychological and historical unity. The concept remains problematic, for it raises many questions about the meaning and identity. Indian people have been migrating to other countries for various reasons. In olden days, crossing a sea was prohibited in India, yet a large number of Indians crossed the sea in different periods of history. The Indian diaspora has been formed by scattering of population not in the Jewish sense, but a migration of population at a particular point in time. A steady and periodic pattern of migration is traced. It has been taken from the indentured laborers of the past to the IT technocrats of the present day. This distinction is between, on the one hand, the semi-voluntary flight of indentured peasants to non-metropolitan plantation colonies such as Fiji, Trinidad, Mauritius, South Africa, Malaysia, Suriname and Guyana, roughly between the years 1830 and 1917, and the other the late capital or postmodern dispersal of new migrants of all classes to thriving metropolitan centers such as Australia, the United States, Canada and Britain. The diasporic Indian is like the banyan tree, the traditional symbol of an Indian way of life. He spreads out his roots in several soils, drawing nourishment from one when the rest dry up. Far from being homeless, he has several homes, and that is the only way he has increasingly come to feel at home in the world. The journey of Indians who migrated was divided into three broad phases: pre-colonial phase, colonial phase, post-colonial phase. Pre-colonial phase. The first evidence of Indian migration is in the 5th century BC during the reign of Ashoka, when the colonists from western India settled in Ceylon, people who were converted to Buddhism. A few Indian merchants went to Malaya, Sumatra, Java and other parts of Southeast Asia and settled there permanently, marrying native women. Brahmins and Buddhist monks followed them. Thus, Indian religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, Indian philosophy and thought influenced the Southeast Asia and gradually inspired their native culture. Sanskrit became their official language. Even till today, the Buddhist stupa of Borobudur in Java, or the Shaivite temple of Angkor in Cambodia, and some Hindu customs in Thailand celebrate Gita Jayanti. There are evidence which prove Indian migration to these countries, like Sanskrit names are still used in Java, and Ramayan legend exists in Indonesia. Colonial phase. In colonial reign, Indian diaspora is observed from the third decade of the 19th century. 1.5 million Indians had sold themselves into debt bondage. They lived in awful conditions and were identified as the slaves. They are the unacknowledged heroes of the Indian diaspora. After the abolition of slavery during the colonial period, British, France, Netherlands and Portugal urgently needed manpower on sugar and rubber plantations. The British established an organized system of temporary labor migration from the Indian subcontinent to meet the demand of laborers. The major reason to leave the subcontinent was poverty. Britain began exporting Indian laborers to Mauritius. The Netherlands and France also relied on Indian workers. By 1878, Indians were working in Guyana and Trinidad, Natal, South Africa, Natal, Suriname and Fiji. Laborers from rural areas would initially sign up for a 5-year contract. Many renewed their contracts, and some chose to stay permanently through. Though indenture system was abolished, some common characteristics between these laborers and indentured laborers were noticed. They were isolated from the rest of the local population and were treated like slaves with severe punishments for disobedience. Post-colonial phase. After India became independent in 1947, a new significant phase of immigration began. As such, 3 patterns of immigration can be identified. The immigration of Anglo-Indians to Australia and England, the immigration of professionals to the industrially advanced countries like the United States of America, England, and Canada. The immigration of skilled and unskilled laborers to West Asia. One of the least studied aspects of Indian diaspora is the immigration of the Anglo-Indians. After India's independence, they felt marginalized and left India for England. Several of them immigrated to Australia because they felt they were not culturally and ethnically accepted by English. For Anglo-Indians, Australia became a second homeland. To trace the notions and feelings of diaspora by Amitabh Ghosh in his 2 novels, Diaspora, etymologically derived from the Greek term diasporian, where dia means across and sporian means to sow or scatter seeds. Diaspora can perhaps be seen as naming of the other, which has historically referred to displaced communities of people who have been dislocated from their native homeland through the movements of migration, immigration, or exile. First used to describe the Jews living in exile from the homeland of Palestine. A diaspora suggests a displacement from the homeland, circumstances, or environmental location of origin and transfer in one or more nation states, territories, or foreign countries. The term diaspora then has certain religious significance and pervaded medieval writings on the Jewish to describe the plight of Jews living outside of Palestine, 586 BC. Another early historical reference is the black African diaspora beginning in the 16th century with the slave trade forcibly exporting West Africans out of their native land and dispersing them into the New World, parts of North America, South America, the Caribbean, and elsewhere that slave labor was exploited through the Middle Passage. These early historical references reveal that diaspora is not always voluntary. Diaspora in the rapidly changing world we now inhabit speaks to diverse persons and communities moving across the globe, from Kuala Lumpur to Sydney, Harare to Toronto, Paris to Marrakesh, or even Calcutta to Trinidad. Just as earlier in the 20th century it mapped the movements of Palestinian refugees from Jerusalem to Amman or Beirut, and Pakistani refugees from Karachi to Dar es Salaam. In thinking through the category of diaspora and its link to geographical entities such as nation states, it is thus crucial to consider the important role of nation formation and constitution during the post-World War II era. While cultural and literary interrogate contemporary form form of movement, displacement, and dislocation from travel to exile. Mass migration movements, the multiple waves of political refugees seeking asylum in other countries, the reconfiguration of nation state, particularly in Central, the concept of nationhood take account of the specific geopolitical circumstances that precipitate the movement of people. The term diaspora used to describe the mass migration and displacement of the second half of the 20th century, particularly in reference to independence to movements in formerly colonized areas, waves of refugees fleeing war-torn states, and fluxes of economic migration. Diaspora has been particularly loosely associated with other terms, particularly transnationalism, to describe the disjunction and fractured condition of late modernity. However, diaspora needs to be extricated from such loose association, and its historical and theoretical specification are made clear. While diaspora may be accurately described as transnationalist, it is not one and the same with transnationalism. Transnationalism may be defined as the course of citizens' thoughts, possessions, and capital across nationalized territories in a way that undermines ethnic group and nationalism, discrete categories of classification, a money-making organization, and political constitution. But there is somewhat a slight difference between diaspora and transnationalism. However, in that diaspora refers specifically to the movement forced to voluntary of the people from one or more nation state to another, whereas transnationalism speaks to larger, more impersonal forces, specifically those of globalization and global capitalism. Diasporic subjects are distincted by hybridity and heterogeneity, artistic, linguistic, cultural, national, and these subjects are defined by the transversal of the borders demarcating nation and diaspora. Diaspora does not, however, transcends a difference of race, class, gender, and sexuality, nor can diaspora stand alone as an epistemology and historical category of analysis, separate and distinct from interrelated categories. More complexly, diasporic scholars have suggested innovating and nuanced ways of thinking across the one demarcated terrains of identity and exploring the imbrications of ethnic and national categories while offering insight into the cultural construction of identity in relation to nationality. Diaspora have gender and sexuality. Of course, class inflicts, if not haunts, the formation of all these categories. To that end, class disrupts and complicates, often in productive ways, the intersection of race, gender, and sexuality. Diaspora has been theorized from many diverse points of departure: East Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian, Asia Pacific, Caribbean, South American, Latin American, African, and Central European. Recent uses of homeland, rational ethnic identity, and geographical location to deployment of diaspora are conceptualized in terms of hybridity or heterogeneity. While diasporic studies has emerged as an important new field of study, it is not without its critics. The term diaspora has been criticized as being theoretically celebrated while ethologically indistinct and historical. Some scholars arguing that diaspora enters into a semantic field with other terms and terrains, such as that of exile, migrant, immigrant, and globalization, have assented that diasporic communities are epitome of the transnationalist movement. Other critics have resisted and critiqued such celebratory models of thinking diaspora, noting that such celebrations are often historical and apolitical, failing to note the different contexts following or prohibiting movement globally or even locally. For example, Bruce Robbins offers a close reading of four journals: Diaspora, Boundary, to social text and public culture, that have broken new ground in stimulating and supporting work in the international area, the non-specialist area, beyond area studies, and such of them see the work it publishes as in some senses of adversarial. Many Indian writers have contributed to the rich tradition of English literary studies. Writers like Mulkraj Anand, Raja Rao, and R.K. Narayan were the ones who made Indian English literature recognized, and all were subjects of the British rule in India. Writers like Nidal C. Chaudhary chosen the English coasts because of his views were not willingly accepted in India. Salman Rushdie's imaginary homeland encompasses the world over. Salman Rushdie, V.S. Naipaul, Amitabh Ghosh, Anita Desai, Rohinton Mistry, Vikram Seth have all made their names while residing abroad. These non-resident Indian writers have tried to discover the feelings of displacement in all of their literature. In one of his interviews, Amitabh Ghosh said that I don't think migration signifies one thing. There are so many reasons why migrations take place. It could be economic, social, political, or even related to education. Amitabh Ghosh is one of the well-known faces in English literature. His work received great critical acclaim, winning several awards and major nominations. Amitabh Ghosh is one of the well-known faces in English literature. His work received great critical acclaim, winning several awards and major nominations. His work deals with remarkable themes set against historical backdrops. His writings reveals about his subterranean connections and patterns, but his all the various ideas that inform his work are basically his characters whose life engages us and take us to some magnificent imagined places and times. Some of his novels are The Circle of Reason, 1986, Shadow Lines, 1988, The Calcutta Chromosome, 1995, The Glass Palace, 2000, The Hungry Tide, 2005, Sea of Poppies, 2008. The Circle of Reason. The Circle of Reason is the first novel of Amitabh Ghosh. The Circle of Reason is remarkable for many reasons. Its theme is different from traditional concerns of Indian English fiction. It challenges a direct and simple appreciation. In fact, it needs different types of approach to be grasped fully. The book itself is sort of a paradox. It exuberates restlessness with extreme control and poise. The new thrust and lift that came to Indian English fiction during late 18th and 19th century is partly due to his path-breaking work. It is daring in its experimentation with form, content, and language of the novel. The Glass Palace. Tracing Indian lives in Burma, Amitabh Ghosh's The Glass Palace recalled Burma as a part of British India. Ghosh, who is from India, attempted to bring the suppressed history of subaltern in this novel. The Glass Palace is therefore condemned to record in Exit Intel Dilemma, wherein the subject is inevitably partitioned. A confused refugee never quite focused nor contained within the frame. In the light of immigration as a worldwide phenomenon, it is indeed Ghosh in his novel The Glass Palace managed to confine the past and what it must have been to move to abroad, settle down there, and then be thrown out of there by war. It gives out the feeling of conquered and exploited and the terrible pressures and tensions of those people who were part of more than one ethnicity and culture, an almost usual result of the movement of people and the British Empire set in motion. In his writings, Amitabh Ghosh portrayed his diasporic feelings, loss of homeland and rootlessness, which were clearly understandable and warmly felt while going through his work. In the late 1960s and the 1970s, doctors, engineers, scientists, and teachers migrated to the industrially advanced countries of the West. The immigration is described as a brain drain migration. It is purely voluntary and as per the wish of an individual. The second and subsequent generations have emerged in foreign society and enjoy economic prosperity and socio-cultural rights. Though immigration is voluntary in nature, but its trends and conditions are determined by labor market theories. It is a male migration leaving families and communities back in India. Among the literatures of the world, Indian literature is an ancient branch which has originated since the Vedic period. Modern Indian literature has a contemporary aspect of glory and ancient treasure of divine thoughts. A large number of people have migrated from India to various foreign lands under forced exiles or self-imposed exiles. Some of them have made a mark in the field of Indian literature. These immigrant writers reflect their connection to the motherland and their feeling of alienation and rootlessness. Indian diasporic writing is a popular network connecting the entire world. In recent years, Indian diaspora has become a significant area of study. The Indian diaspora plays a noteworthy role in reflecting the complexities of diasporic experiences in literature. Its aim is to examine the displacement and the nostalgia for their homeland and alienation caused by displacement or dislocation, as well as conflict between generations and cultural identity. Diaspora writers portray the cultural dilemmas, the generational differences, and transformation of their identities during displacement. Exile and alienation developed the diaspora writers to seek a solution in their writings and establish a permanent place in English diaspora literature. Diaspora literature is quite different. Today, multicultural literature is considered as major source of insight into the cultural dynamics of modern society. In the last decade, diasporic literature has developed its meaning and expanded in various directions. But in recent years, it has become bigger, thicker, and stronger. The diaspora writings or expatriate writings or immigrant writings give voice to the displacing experiences of the writers when they are on the stand owing to the clash of two cultures or the racial discrimination they undergo. Immigration proves a pleasant experience to immigrants who succeed in understanding themselves with a new geographical, cultural, social, and psychological environment. To most of the diaspora writers, immigration is not a delightful experience. They often find themselves sandwiched between two cultures. The feeling of nostalgia, a sense of loss, and anxiety to reinvent a home preoccupy them, which find conscious or unconscious expression in their writings. Diaspora or expatriate writing occupies great significance between countries and cultures. Theories are generated and positions defined in order to create new identities. This movement causes the dislocation and location of cultures and individuals renew upon memories. The chief features of the diaspora writings are the quest for identity, uprooting and rerouting, insider and outsider syndrome, nostalgia, nagging sense of guilt, etc. So this way, dear students, I have completed my lecture today. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to